Big day of relief for market bulls, but one sector that has been an outlier in its strength this year is healthcare, in particular some of the big pharma trades. Let's talk about a few with our next guest joining us from Mizzou Americas. Mara Goldstein is a managing director and senior biotech analyst. Mara, great to have you here. Let's jump straight into it. A couple stocks that you like. Merck being one that I think we're all familiar with, that looks like it still has the dominance in the oncology sector. Is that the bull case?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. One is, the company does have dominance in the oncology space with KEYTRUDA. That's honestly been, a plus and a minus for the company because of the concentration of revenues, but they're able to take those funds and deploy them elsewhere. So the company's been doing, smaller tuck-in acquisitions, and the question becomes, can they ultimately come up with enough firepower here to offset KEYTRUDA later in the decade when they get loss of exclusivity. But there's also been a flight, essentially to a defensive quality name, and Merck certainly fits that build in a rising interest rate environment. These stocks look pretty good.
Can we track, and if so, would love to hear any details or numbers from your own channel checks or research. Have we seen how hospital activity has changed over the past year as COVID patients have gotten fewer and fewer? Can we see how many people are in for treatments that maybe got delayed or were pushed back?
Sure. I mean, beginning with last year, we really saw, I think, a big shift away from, sort of the impact that COVID had. Although, according to our own analyst here who covers hospital and healthcare services, there's still a bit lag. We're not necessarily all the way up to pre-levels. IQVIA, which is market resource, publishes data. But really, the question, I think, for a company like Merck is what gets affected and how. KEYTRUDA, from a cancer perspective, has largely been unaffected through this, in part because injectable drugs for cancer have largely been unaffected, but also because the company has been able to secure so many new approvals that the number of new patients coming in far offsets the dampening effect that COVID, had. There are other products in the company's portfolio, some more heavily affected by COVID. A product called Bridion, which is a drug that is used during surgeries, and in particular elective surgeries, was certainly impacted. We're certainly seeing an upswing in that. It's not quite back, I think, from a demand perspective where it was pre-COVID, but it's moving in that direction.
Okay, so there's still some volume, I guess, that's coming through the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, you still have a question of, the COVID impact and the relative surges. So certainly we have seen those, certainly over the course of the last year. Those surges have tended to be, I think, pretty narrow in scope on a relative basis compared to where we were the year before. Okay.
One of the other companies that you like, TCRR, definitely very different performer on the year, but going after some of the same sector in oncology, a little bit of a different approach versus KEYTRUDA's CAR T style treatment. Is that right?
So KEYTRUDA is not a CAR T, right? It's called a checkpoint inhibitor, and it's a drug that you take intravenously, and it essentially helps the immune system recognize cancer and go after the cancer cells. So TCR works on the cell therapy side, which is essentially taking your cells, manipulating them to go after the cancer. It's really more on the, it's more on the riskier scale when it comes to when you think about oncology. It's really a totally new approach to treating solid tumors, and the company's is just starting a phase 2 trial looking at how to try and treat patients whose tumors express something called mesothelin. So think about mesothelioma, also ovarian cancer, some lung cancers as well. It's an interesting approach. It really needs to be validated in terms of bigger studies, and it's this is sort of the barbell. Merck is a very large established pharmaceutical company, and TCR2 is a small biotech. So very, very different ends of the sort of healthcare barbell, if you will. So one of the companies that I would put in the middle of that barbell that we do cover is Arcus, and that's RCUS is the ticker. And that company is developing a variety of drugs, more along the lines of a KEYTRUDA, right? Drugs that are either taken orally or injected, and also for cancer. And they have a relationship with a large biotech company called Gilead, and a pretty big readout coming up fairly shortly. So I put them in the middle of that barbell.
When is that? When should we be looking at the update?
Sure. Well, we're expecting sometime before the end of the year update on a trial of theirs called ARC-7, which is looking at a novel mechanism called TIGIT, combining it with a checkpoint inhibitor for treatment of also lung cancer. Lung cancer is a fairly big market when it comes to the treatment of cancer, just because of the sheer number of individuals who get treated for lung cancer. And that will give us a sense directionally of what the activity of this combination is. And then the company also has a bigger trial that is ongoing, and that data we won't have for a bit, but the ARC-7 will really be the first bit of data that we'll see, quantitative bit of data that will say, how many patients actually responded, potentially how long they how long they went without seeing any type of progression of their disease.
Interesting. Now, for ARCUS and TCR, are these standalone treatments, or will they also experiment with combinations? As I know, a lot of these treatments will take something and try and combine it with another treatment as well.
Yeah, we're largely talking about combinations in some ways for both these therapies, but for different reasons, quite frankly. On the one hand, combinations for ARCUS, because we certainly see that these drugs do tend to work best in combination. And on the other hand, for TCR, looking at their therapy to use in combination with a checkpoint inhibitor to improve the durability, or in essence, how long patients respond for.
Okay. Love the details, Mara, and a couple overlooked ones there for us, too. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good
All right,
stuff.
have a great day.
All right, you too. Mara Goldstein joining us from Mizuho Americas. A few stocks there, RCUS, as well as TCRR in addition to Merck.